Coming in with a beat on earnings, but a slight miss on revenue. It looked like the pharmaceuticals and medical devices units came in just slightly shy of expectations. Nonetheless, J&J raising its full-year forecast. Joining us now to dig into all of this is Joe Wolk, the company's chief financial officer. Joe, it's good to see you this morning. Walk us through this quarter. It looked like maybe slight miss in those two units, and yet you still sort of raised your full-year forecast to help us understand.
Yeah, good morning, Meg. Pleasure to be here with you. So the miss, I would say, is really a matter of timing. The first part of it was really related to the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, where we have not changed our full year guidance of about $2.5 billion in revenue. And we plan to ship what we can manufacture through the balance of the year. So really just a timing element there. And I'd almost classify the medical device miss as something very similar. As you know, in the quarter, we experienced fluctuations in elective procedures with the Delta variant. We also know that hospital staffing is somewhat constrained, and that served to reduce volume in the third quarter with respect to elective procedures. We see those procedures coming back in the fourth quarter or early next year. So we feel very good about the results we were able to deliver on the top line overall in our core business. If you think about pharmaceuticals, growing 13%, consumer products growing almost 6%, and even medical devices with all those fluid dynamics still growing better than 7%. It was really just an outstanding quarter by our companies worldwide. We're also extremely proud that we're able to increase and meet the short-term objectives and increase our R&D investment. Last year was a record year with respect to our investment in innovation. Through 9 months, we're 23% better or higher in investment in R&D. So we're meeting, as I said, the short-term objectives, but also positioning the company for the long term, for the balance of this decade.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that hospital staffing issue. This was something that analysts had flagged from some other companies working in this space, and this is something we've been worried about throughout COVID. But you see that getting better in the fourth quarter. Is that right? Just tell us about those dynamics.
Yeah, Meg, we do see it. And again, just a tremendous job by the hospital administrators, particularly across this country. There is worker fatigue. There's certainly vaccine mandates have played into the mindset of some. And so the hospitals are very efficient now at scheduling those procedures out into the future, creating, I would say, a mini backlog. It's not going to be the same bolus that we saw maybe in July or August of 2020 when the second quarter of that year really kind of went dry. So I see it much more programmatic in terms of it coming back in a very systematic way.
Well, let's talk about your COVID vaccine, because as always, there's a lot of news just leading up to this report today in that sphere. Last week, of course, FDA's advisors voted to recommend a booster dose of J&J's vaccine to everybody at least 2 months out. And the feeling from a lot of the committee members seemed to be that this should have been a 2-dose vaccine all along. But J&J has positioned it as a 1-dose vaccine for the pandemic. I'm wondering J&J's reaction to the comments that came out of that committee meeting, as well as what you're seeing around the world, because if this becomes a perceived 2-dose vaccine, that has huge implications for global supply.
Yeah, so Meg, I think it's certainly we could sit here 15, 18 months later and say what could have been, what should have been. I would remind people as to how the WHO defines the gold standard for vaccines in a pandemic, and one that's being efficacious in terms of limiting hospitalization and death. It's a one-shot. And it's easily transportable. And I think if you look at the J&J vaccine and how that's playing as part of the solution to end the pandemic, where we have, approximately 50 million doses already out in the developing world, that's 3 times the number of the combined mRNA vaccines. And I don't mean to be critical of them. They've played certainly a very key role in stopping the pandemic as well. But I think it took multiple players, and we don't have any reservations about how we approach this. We were trying to live into the gold standard. I think we've done that. And the booster will only build upon the 94% efficacy that we have established through the data that was seen last week, as well as what I would say is best-in-class durability. A booster should only help that going forward.
Of course, there is a lot of conversation about switching brands for a booster for J&J after the antibody data came out from the NIH study last week. The New York Times last night reporting the FDA is leaning toward flexibility and allowing people to switch brands for boosters. How does J&J view that situation for its vaccine going forward?
Yeah, so we're certainly monitoring the situation, but like we always do, we're going to respect the scientific process. I think if you look at the NIH study that was being referenced, that measured antibodies. As we know with the adenovirus, T cell activity is really what is indicative of efficacy. But we're going to respect the process, see how it plays out, and we'll proceed accordingly there.